The bells of King's Landing sound loud and ominous. The whole city is awake, and the Red Keep is in chaos. Aerys has the letter in his hands where the outcome of the battle at the Trident is written. His eyes are glued to it, not saying a single word. He simply asks what time they have. Jaime, who stands next to him, claims they might have 2 weeks at best. Jaime again pleads Aerys to ask help of Tywin. He will help them, surely. Aerys is boiling inside and again refuses. After Jaime pleads more and more, even saying that they can never hope to win any battle alone, Aerys smacks him across the face. If he ever dares to question his authority again, he will be imprisoned. Rhaegar lies in her chamber. She's clearly in the final weeks of pregnancy as her belly has grown very big. It's then that several servants come in and start to pack in everything. Rhaegar is confused as she holds little Viserys in her arms. The servants eventually claim the king has ordered to evacuate her and the children. The whole castle is on high alert as people are running everywhere. Aerys shouting orders and commands everywhere. Boats and ships must be made ready. The queen and her children will be evacuated to Dragonstone. When a servant asks what must be done with Elia Martell and her 2 children, the king ignores it. She will stay here. At Casterly Rock, Tywin has also received a raven with news from the battle at the Trident. He thinks deeply as several of his generals stand by with further orders. His brother Kevan also urges them to make a decision. This war is already won, but now they must decide whose side they are on. Whatever side they choose, it could make a great deal. As everyone discusses several outcomes and choices, Tywin just sits in silence, thinking. Do they support the king and keep their alliance strong? Or do they side with the rebels now that Rhaegar Targaryen is dead? The moment when everyone in the room is almost shouting, Tywin finally orders silence. He then announces they will march out to King's Landing. They will choose a side. The right side. It's time they do what they should have done a long time ago. Kevan nods and orders everyone to get ready. Soon the whole army of House Lannister is ready to march out. Tywin, dressed in his war armor, meets a final time with Cersei. He orders them to stay here until the war has ended. Whatever happens, she must stay here. Tywin then looks at little Tyrion, but doesn't say anything. He just nods and leaves. In the courtyards of Casterly Rock, Tywin walks around and meets several of his men. But he's looking for one in particular. It's there that he meets a giant monster of a man, also dressed in armor. Rhaegar Clegane, the Mountain. Gregor bows before Tywin, who tells him that he has a special mission for him. Clegane nods and listens carefully. At the Trident, Robert is hailed as a king while he heals from the injury on his leg. All the others are outside, celebrating and planning their march down to the capital. Ned, Hoster and Jon are both discussing it in the main tent. They should arrive within 2 weeks if they ride steady. Now that Rhaegar has fallen, the people of King's Landing would be wise to open their doors for the victors. Jon shakes his head. He knows Aerys will never just surrender like that. Whatever happens, they must be ready for all sorts of outcomes. Afterwards, Ned visits Robert in their private tent. They both know the war is as good as won. Robert laughs. His fury was strong. Once they take King's Landing, Aerys will surrender or die, and a new reign will begin. Eddard nods. But he knows the capital isn't just Aerys and his followers. There are also families there. Innocent children. What happens to them? Robert states nothing will happen to them. They are innocent. Only the king himself must be brought to justice. Eddard is pleased to hear that. Eventually they hear some people shouting again outside. Tons of soldiers cheering Robert's name. Eddard and his friend both laugh and head outside. It's there that Robert is again cheered by numerous people, all of them hailing him as the conqueror he is. All of them calling him the one true king. All of that while the captured forces of Rhaegar, including Barristan Selmy, have to watch and listen while locked up in small cells. Barristan feels sad, But now he can only think of one thing: Arthur and his mission south. Whatever secrets Rhaegar kept, he didn't trust that one with Barristan Selmy. Only moments before the battle, he told him, in case he and Arthur Dayne would fall. Barristan prays to the gods that Arthur reaches Dorne in time, before any of the King's men should. In the dungeons of the Red Keep, Varys is still locked up. Aerys visits him, as he's still thinking about what to do with him. He tells Varys about the outcome of a trident, about Rhaegar's death, about everything. Varys eventually claims the war is lost. If Robert won't take the city, Tywin will. Aerys snorts at that. Tywin will never help them, but neither would he burn this city to the ground. He would never go that far. Varys tries to convince the king that no one can be trusted. His reign is over. It was over the moment he burned Rickard and Brandon Stark alive. Aerys snaps, cursing Varys. He states that it would have never happened if Rhaegar kept his loyalty and didn't run off with that Stark girl. After a few moments of silence, the king suddenly starts to laugh. Laughing like a maniac, almost terrifying Varys. Aerys says that Varys and Arthur Dayne did so much to keep that Stark bitch safe. But now it will all be for nothing. Varys feels a turn in his stomach. What does he mean by that? Aerys continues to laugh as he walks away. The spider is left alone in the dark, fearing for the lives of everyone. In Dorne, a pregnant Lyanna arrives at a tall tower with the servants who stayed there with her. As they arrive, they all start to grab their luggage and head inside. As they are doing this, they suddenly notice riders arriving from over the horizon. Lyanna wonders if it's Rhaegar coming back for her with help. Several servants and nurses also wonder the same thing. Suddenly they notice the riders in the distance having something in their hands. At the same time, small dots of black seem to erupt in the air and come straight towards Lyanna and the rest. She notices too late. They are arrows. One of the servants is hit in the face and drops dead. Two others are also immediately struck down. Lyanna grabs some of the others and orders them to head inside. The riders come at them like black demons as they fire arrow after arrow. Lyanna and all the other nurses head inside as chaos and panic ensue. Around a dozen riders arrive. They get off their horses and run up the stairs in order to enter the tower. The people inside have barred at the door, but this poses little threat as the attackers cut their way in with their swords and knives. Lyanna runs to a chamber where she opens one of her bags. She takes Rhaegar's sword that he left behind and starts to run back down. As the attackers enter, they cut down one of the nurses, but then Lyanna comes storming through and quickly slashes down the two riders. A fight ensues at the staircase. Some of the servants also fight back but pose little threat. As Lyanna manages to cut down a couple more, she is eventually punched to the ground. Her slightly pregnant belly is exposed. The attackers notice and start to curse her. The moment one of them raises his sword to stab Lyanna right through her stomach, another sword bursts through the man's chest. All of them look up as they see Arthur Dayne standing behind them. He quickly beheads the attacker as he, Gerald Hightower, and Oswell Went team up and fight the remaining attackers. All push them outside where the fight continues. Both Gerald and Oswell do a steady job at fighting, but Arthur completely butchers every man that comes close. As the fight ensues, Lyanna is helped up as she feels pain in her belly. The nurses immediately help her by taking her to a chamber to rest and recover. Outside, Arthur takes the final three attackers on by himself. As the final one is wounded, he curses Arthur for being a traitor. He's no Kingsguard. Arthur doesn't respond and then proceeds to cut off the man's head. As the fight is over, Arthur heads back inside while Oswell and Gerald stay outside to guard the tower. Arthur quickly enters the chamber at the top, where Lyanna lies in bed. It's then that he notices she's pregnant. The nurses all thank him, as does Lyanna. She asks where Rhaegar is. What happened? Where is he? All of this while she's experiencing pain. Arthur doesn't know what to say. He doesn't know what happened at the Trident. The only thing he can do is give her the roses his prince had given him before. As Lyanna takes them, she starts to cry out of pain and emotions at once. The nurses quickly arrive with medication and water. The atmosphere is very hectic. Arthur promises to stay here with the others, while Lyanna keeps on grunting because of the pain in her belly. In King's Landing, tensions are higher than ever. The streets are filled with panicking civilians, all of them being ordered to head inside their homes. The city walls are manned with soldiers and catapults. Although vastly outnumbered, Aerys is destined to defend the city against the rebels. Queen Rhaegar is brought to her ship as they are sent to Dragonstone. She's heavily pregnant. Although she's happy to get away, she does look for her husband, but Aerys is nowhere to be seen. Her servants urge her to keep moving. They must sail away as quickly as possible. Rhaegar tries to look for her husband a final time, but eventually the ship sails away, and the queen can only caress her belly and hold Viserys' hand, thinking of a better life. Hopefully. From a balcony, Jaime sees the whole city going in full lockdown. He can't help but feel scared. He eventually heads downstairs in search for the king, but he can't find him anywhere. He keeps looking and asking servants if they saw him, until one tells Jaime he saw the king heading down to the dungeons. Jaime proceeds to head downstairs and make his way to the deepest cells. That's where he eventually finds the doorway to a hidden laboratory, the Pyromancer's laboratory. He carefully enters and sees several of them working hard, as Aerys stands there and gives orders. They are talking about placing certain crates and caches in the underground tunnels of the city, but Jaime doesn't understand. When the king sees him, he gets angry and tells him that it's forbidden to be here. But the young Kingsguard this time stands his ground and demands to know what's going on here. What are they doing? After a small argument, the king decides to be honest and shows Jaime what they have been doing all this time. He shows him dozens and dozens of caches filled with green substance, Wildfire. His loyal pyromancers have been working day and night to make as much of it as possible. Until now, they are finally ready. Jaime is confused. Ready for what? To use it against the rebels? Aerys then takes Jaime with him to another passageway, revealing the entrance to the entire underground complex of King's Landing. It's now that Aerys finally reveals his true plan. He has been placing caches of Wildfire beneath the entire city. They will fight the rebels until the last man, but if the city should be breached and fall, he will make sure none will survive. King's Landing is his or no one's. Jaime can't believe what he's hearing. Aerys is going to set the whole city on fire if he can't win? What about the people? What about the thousands of men, women and children? They have done nothing, not even the rebels would harm them. Aerys starts to get angry again. A very intense verbal fight erupts between the two. Jaime keeps on urging the king to use his senses. They can't set fire to a whole city. Nothing would survive. It's madness. That makes Aerys chuckle. Is that what they are calling him then? Mad? To save his own house, his reign, his family? Aerys almost smacks Jaime down again, but then a pyromancer storms through and announces an army has been spotted over the hills. Aerys is shocked and storms out of the laboratory while Jaime tries to comprehend what on earth is happening. Aerys runs all the way to the balcony of his chamber. It's then that he sees a massive army of around 12,000 men with Lannister banners. Aerys can't believe it. Tywin. He came after all. Tywin rides at the front of his large host straight towards the city gates. As they arrive, the gates are still closed. Tywin himself asks the guards to open them. They are here to help. Their alliance is still strong. The guards on top of the city wall don't know what to do, however. Aerys walks to the throne room as he contemplates with several others. Grand Maester Pycelle is also present, who claims they should open the gates. The Lannisters have always been friends of the throne. They can trust him. Jaime is silent, still in shock of what he saw earlier. Several servants and generals are also present, some urging the king to keep the gates closed, yet others urge the opposite. After a discussion, Aerys looks at Jaime and says that this will be the time for them to prove their true loyalty. Tywin and his host are still outside, waiting, until suddenly they hear the guards saying certain things, and before they know it, the gates slowly open for them. They hear several Targaryen soldiers cheering and applauding for the arrival of the Lannisters. They will stand a chance now, the war isn't over yet, there is still hope. Once the gates are fully opened, several Targaryen soldiers come out to escort Tywin and the others in. Tywin stays still, looking the soldiers dead in the eyes. A cold stare is in his eyes. The soldiers stop and suddenly feel an equally cold chill going down their spines. It's then that Tywin gives a signal, and numerous archers appear behind them to shoot down the Targaryen soldiers. It all happens so quickly, no one can process it. Tywin then raises his hand, and on that order, the entire Lannister army storms through the gates and assaults the city. The riders storm through and start to slay everyone in their path. Aerys watches the assault happen from his balcony. His eyes are wide open, his mouth dropped. Tywin, his brother, his betrayer. The army of Tywin storms through the gates and puts every revolting soldier to the sword. A brutal and hectic fight ensues, although that's not really what this is. This is a sacking. This is a massacre. Civilians are running through the streets, all trying to escape the carnage. Some even beg for mercy, but even they get overrun by the Lannister soldiers as they come charging through with their horses and swords. People die in the streets, in their houses, everywhere. Tywin watches the event while suddenly the bells of the Red Keep start to ring loudly. He looks closely and then turns around to Rhaegar Targaryen. He gives the man a nod, and that's enough for the giant to know what to do. The Mountain rides in on his horse with several other soldiers as they storm through the streets. Aerys is screaming inside the Red Keep. He curses everyone. Jaime is lost for words. He feels like his insides are twisting around. This can't be happening. This is a nightmare. All he can do is beg the king to surrender. Jaime almost falls down and begs Aerys to kneel before Tywin and the rebels. There's nothing they can do. Aerys shakes his head like a madman. There's something they can do. Aerys nods to one of his pyromancers. Jaime can't believe it. They can't do that. They will kill everyone, including themselves. Aerys laughs. Laughing and screaming and crying all at the same time. Elia is in her chamber as she watches the massacre take place. She grabs both little Rhaenys and Aegon as she tries to get out, only to discover that the door has been locked. Panicking, she starts to barge against the door, begging anyone to let her out. Let me out, let me out. I must flee the city. Where is Rhaegar? Where is the king? On her ship, Rhaela sits alone in her cabin. She sees the last bits of King's Landing in the distance. The queen holds Viserys tight. Together, they will survive. As long as they stay strong as a family, they will make it. She tells Viserys all these things in order to calm his heart. But deep down, she knows the real truth. The fighting continues in the streets of King's Landing. Hundreds of Targaryen soldiers who try to fight back against the Lannisters, but all of them are overrun. People are slaughtered on the spot. Houses are put to the torch. People are even killed in the most brutal of ways. It's as if an army of hell beasts has been let loose. From her balcony, Elia tries to find a way out. She notices a lower balcony where she can descend to. Quickly, she ties her, Rhaenys and Aegon to a piece of rope so they can lower themselves from her balcony to the other. All the while, the city is burning and bleeding behind them. They reach the second balcony, and Elia manages to open the door leading to the hallway. Holding her 2 children, she starts to run as fast as she can, headed towards the harbor to find a boat to escape this nightmare. As she almost reaches the docks, suddenly she is spotted by several Targaryen soldiers. They immediately grab her and pull her back, claiming the king has ordered her to stay here. Elia tries to resist, claiming the city is lost, everything is lost. They need to evacuate, but whatever she says, the soldiers don't listen. They drag the princess back into the castle, Rhaenys and Aegon crying as they are also taken back inside. The gate of the Red Keep is being held tight by several Targaryen soldiers, but soon Lannister soldiers reach it from the other side and try to put all their strength into it to breach through. The Targaryen loyalists do everything they can to keep the Lannisters out, but it's almost futile. Suddenly, the barging stops. The soldiers for a moment think it's over, until the gate suddenly is brutally breached by the Mountain. He sits on his horse while swinging his massive sword, killing everyone on his path. Once the gate is breached, dozens, hundreds of soldiers storm the courtyard and enter the Red Keep. It's only now that the rebels, the true rebels, arrive from over the hills. Robert, Eddard, Howland, Hoster, and Jon, all of them are shocked to see the city being under attack. They see Lannister banners. They have no idea what to think. Robert and Eddard share a quick look at each other, and then all ride down the hill and through the city gates as well. The several pyromancers all head down to the laboratory in order to unleash the wildfire on the city. The moment they want to do it, they are stopped by Jaime. He draws out his sword and orders them to stand back. The pyromancers won't. This is the king's order. They must obey him. Jaime claims the king won't be a king for long. That makes some of the pyromancers snap. What is this? Is Jaime Lannister an oathbreaker? He isn't a Kingsguard. He isn't worthy. After many warnings, the pyromancers try to ignite the wildfire altogether, and Jaime is forced to act. He screams loudly as ever as he swings his sword high in the air, slashing down. Elia is taken by several of the soldiers through the halls. Suddenly they are encountered by the Lannister soldiers. The Targaryens are forced to drop Elia and her children and start to fight for their own lives. Elia quickly grabs her children and starts to make a run for it again, while all the chaos and fighting ensues around her. She runs as fast as she can until she is confronted by the Mountain and his men. He immediately grabs her by the throat as he asks his men if she is the one. A Lannister soldier takes a quick look at her face and confirms. Yes, it's her, Elia Martell with her 2 children. Elia is crying, begging for her children's life. Gregor smiles and then throws her to the ground. The moment Elia hits the floor, all the sound cuts away. There's not a single thing that is heard. Only Elia as she sees the Mountain grabbing little Aegon and smashing him against the wall. Elia screams as loudly as ever, yet we don't hear anything. No sound at all. Just the quick flashes of brutality. She gets up and tries to stop him. She doesn't even notice how her daughter, Rhaenys, has fled. Gregor orders his men to chase after her, while he himself drags Elia into another chamber alone. He closes the door and throws her down to the floor again. Like an animal, he starts to hold his hands around her face, his fingers in her eyes, and slowly squeezes. Elia's last moment is that of pure pain and agony. Princess Rhaenys runs through the halls while being chased by the Lannisters. People are fighting and dying everywhere. She's crying, panicking, yelling for her mother. Eventually running into a chamber and hiding underneath a bed. The Lannisters quickly find her, however, and they drag her from underneath the bed and all start to stab the girl numerous times with their swords, as the floor is filled with red. Aerys is all alone in the throne room. He screams and laughs and cries, a horrific, disturbing sound that comes out of his mouth. All the while the bells outside are heard and the sound of fighting echoes through the halls. It's then that he hears someone enter. The king turns around and sees Jaime standing there with a bloody sword. The king demands to know where his pyromancers are. Where are they? Jaime claims there are no pyromancers anymore. This city won't burn as long as he stands. Aerys is silent. This isn't how it ends. Jaime is loyal to him. He will prove it. The only way this ends is when he sees Tywin's head before him and everyone burns. All of it should burn. Burn it. Burn it all. Burn them all. Aerys starts to scream like a maniac. Jaime stands there in silence with his sword in hand, and he orders the king to stop this. Stop it. Stop this madness. The only thing Aerys eventually orders Jaime to do is to go outside and bring him Tywin's head. Murder his own father. That will stop this madness. Yes. Jaime can't believe it. He starts to shake and tremble. His head feels like it's about to explode. All the while Aerys is laughing and screaming and crying. It's too much. It's too much. In the flash of an eye, Jaime walks to the king and stabs him with his sword from behind. The king gasps, but keeps on saying the same thing he has been saying the whole time. Burn them all. Burn them all. Burn them all. As Aerys keeps saying it, Jaime starts to grunt and finally slits the king's throat. Aerys' blood fills the whole floor of the throne room. His body drops dead at the steps of the Iron Throne. Jaime stands before the body of his king. It's silent. He doesn't realize what he just did. He simply heads up to the stairs of the Iron Throne and sits down while overlooking the entire throne room and the dead king laying at his feet. There, Jaime sits, while the bells still sound in the distance and the sounds of fighting and killing are happening in the other halls. There he sits, Jaime Lannister, the Kingslayer.